Welcome, everyone. Today, we bring you another chilling true crime story. One that is real, disturbing, and impossible to forget. Every detail matters, and every moment leads closer to the truth. So stay connected with us till the end, because this story will change the way you see crime forever. The man who came back in the dark ***. The snow along the interstate reflected the dull orange glow of passing headlights, a quiet witness to a man who had already crossed a line long before his tires touched Ohio pavement. Michael McCoo tightened his grip on the steering wheel as the GPS voice calmly announced the remaining miles. 6 hours. 6 hours of silence, memories, and a decision that no amount of rational thinking could undo. He had told himself this drive was about closure. That was the word he clung to, closure, as though it could sanitize what was festering inside him. Closure for a marriage that had ended quietly on paper but never truly ended in his mind. Closure for the life he believed had been stolen from him and rebuilt by someone else. Michael was a surgeon. Precision was his craft. Control was his comfort. In the operating room, chaos bowed to his steady hands. But outside of it, life had defied him in ways he never forgave. Years earlier, when he first met Monique at Ohio State, she had been laughter and warmth incarnate. She made crowded rooms feel smaller, quieter, safer. He had fallen in love not with who she was, but with who he believed she would always be, with him. Their marriage had been brief, brittle, and quietly dissolved under the weight of distance, ambition, and emotional absence. On paper, the divorce read amicable. In reality, it left behind a man who had lost control. Michael told colleagues that he had moved on. He had money, status, a respected career. A luxury condo in Chicago. A life most people would envy. But envy was exactly what poisoned him when he learned, years later, that Monique had remarried. She had built a life without him. Spencer Teep was everything Michael was not. Openly joyful, deeply rooted, emotionally present. A dentist, yes, but also a father who showed up, a husband who laughed loudly, a man who belonged. Spencer and Monique's home in Columbus was filled with noise, warmth, children's toys scattered like proof of happiness. Michael had watched it all from a distance. Social media. Mutual acquaintances. Carefully curated glimpses of a life that should have been his. By the time his car exited the highway near downtown Columbus, the sky was ink black. The city slept, unaware of the quiet violence approaching. He parked several blocks away. No headlights near the house. No sudden movements. Surveillance cameras were everywhere now, he knew that, but familiarity had made him careless. He pulled the hood of his jacket low and walked through the alley behind the home, breath fogging in the winter air. Inside the house, 2 small children slept upstairs, their dreams untouched by the danger threading through the walls. Michael did not think of them. Or perhaps he refused to. The door opened without force. How it happened would later become a question whispered by investigators and debated in courtrooms. What mattered in that moment was that Michael crossed the threshold of a home that was no longer his to enter. Upstairs, the house was quiet except for the hum of the heater. Spencer was asleep. Monique was asleep. Their trust in the safety of night would be their final mistake. The gunshots shattered everything. Neighbors would later report nothing unusual. No screams, no alarms, only the sound of a city breathing. Within minutes, 2 lives were extinguished. A husband and wife. Parents. People who had been loved. Michael left the house the same way he entered it. By the time the sun rose, he was already gone, driving back toward Illinois, the weight of what he had done settling in like frost. Morning arrived in Columbus with routine indifference. Dentists' offices opened. Phones rang. Coffee brewed. And somewhere, a man named Spencer Teep did not show up for work. At first, concern was professional. Spencer was punctual, obsessively so. When calls went unanswered, unease crept in. By mid-morning, that unease turned into dread. The first police visit missed the house entirely, a mistake that would haunt the department. But instinct, that quiet voice of truth, pushed friends toward the door. They knocked. They listened. They heard children crying. Inside, the house told a story no one wanted to read. Blood stained the bedroom. Spencer lay still, his body bearing the violence of multiple gunshots. Monique was found nearby, her life taken just as swiftly. The children, miraculously, were alive. By noon, Columbus was gripped by horror. Police worked through the house with methodical care. Shell casings, trajectories, the absence of forced entry. The quiet efficiency of the crime suggested planning, not panic. This was not a burglary. This was personal. Detectives began reconstructing the final hours. Surveillance footage from nearby homes revealed a figure moving through the alley between 2 and 5 in the morning. Hood up, face turned away. The image was grainy, but the movements were deliberate. The car appeared next, a vehicle arriving before the killings and leaving shortly after. That car would change everything. License plate readers, toll records, traffic cameras. Each piece of data narrowed the search until the road pointed north, to Illinois, to Rockford, to a man who once shared vows with a woman now dead. Michael McCoo was arrested just after midnight. When he walked into the courtroom the next morning, he wore a jail-issued jumpsuit, hands shackled, expression calm. When the judge asked his name, he answered evenly, Michael McCoo. No emotion, no explanation. The documents told a story prosecutors would later assemble like a puzzle. The divorce, the distance, the drive, the surveillance footage, the vehicle evidence. Investigators searched his residence, his car, his digital life, pulling threads that would soon weave into a case of alleged premeditation. Outside the courthouse, the world struggled to reconcile the image of a surgeon with the accusation of murder. Neighbors spoke of casual conversations, shared barbecues, polite smiles. The dissonance was unsettling, but the deepest pain lived elsewhere. Two children, too young to understand loss, would grow up without memories of the parents who loved them. Family members released a statement asking for justice, not revenge. They spoke of carrying forward Monique and Spencer's love, of protecting the children left behind. As Michael waived extradition and prepared to return to Ohio, the question lingered like a wound that refused to close. Why now? Why after years of silence? Why after happiness had been rebuilt? Perhaps the answer lived in the quiet spaces of Michael's mind, in the place where control slipped away and obsession took its place. Justice would take time. Evidence would be weighed. Arguments would be made. Guilt would be debated in a courtroom far removed from the house where two lives ended. But one truth remained undeniable. On a cold December night, violence shattered a family, and no verdict could ever fully repair what was lost. The drive back to Ohio was silent. Michael McCoo sat in the back seat of the transport vehicle, wrists cuffed, ankles chained, staring at a window that reflected nothing but darkness. The Illinois highways slipped past like a blur of choices he could no longer undo. The officers up front didn't speak. They didn't need to. Silence was safer, for them and for him. Inside his mind, however, there was no quiet. Every mile brought him closer to Columbus, closer to the house, closer to the version of himself that would be frozen forever in court transcripts and evidence bags. He had once believed intelligence could outmaneuver consequence, that precision and planning could erase trace. Surgeons were trained to think several steps ahead. But the problem with murder was that it never ended where you thought it would. It multiplied. Back in Columbus, detectives were working without rest. Screens glowed in darkened rooms. Surveillance footage replayed endlessly, slowed, zoomed, enhanced. A figure walking through an alley. The angle of shoulders. The length of stride. Small details that meant nothing alone but everything together. Then came the digital trail. Michael's phone had been careful, but not invisible. Cell tower pings placed him far from where he claimed to be. Toll records showed a vehicle matching his registered car passing through multiple states during the precise window of the murders. Gas station cameras captured fleeting images. A man paying at the counter, hood up, eyes down, unaware he was being recorded for history. The vehicle was a gift to prosecutors. Inside it, investigators found fibers, soil traces consistent with the area behind the Teep home, and microscopic evidence that told a story Michael never anticipated. A single oversight. One moment of arrogance. At the house, forensic teams continued their work. The shell casings, 9mm, were catalogued, measured, and analyzed. Ballistics would take time, but even without the weapon, patterns emerged. The angle of entry wounds. The order of shots. The positioning of the bodies. This was not chaos. This was intention. Spencer had been shot multiple times, likely awakened by the first gunshot. Monique, investigators believed, had been the first target. One shot. Close. Controlled. The crime scene whispered a narrative of obsession. Detectives dug into the past. The divorce records. The timeline. Messages exchanged, or not exchanged, over the years. On the surface, the split between Michael and Monique had been quiet, civil, almost forgettable. But absence can hide resentment better than conflict ever could. Emails recovered from Michael's devices revealed fixation. Searches conducted late at night. Social media pages visited again and again. Photos saved. Dates noted. Locations bookmarked. Not communication. Surveillance. The prosecutor assigned to the case reviewed the evidence in silence, the weight of it settling in slowly. This was not a crime of passion in the legal sense. Passion burned hot and fast. This had been cold, patient, thought through. The charge, aggravated premeditated murder, fit. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered daily, microphones raised, voices hushed but hungry. The story had captured the public imagination because it shattered expectations. A surgeon, a father of no children, a man who had everything and allegedly chose destruction. Inside a private room far from cameras, family members gathered. Grief did not move in straight lines. It crashed, retreated, returned without warning. Spencer's parents sat side by side, hands clasped, staring at nothing. Monique's relatives struggled with a different pain, the knowledge that her past had come back to kill her future. And the children. They were shielded from the worst of it, but trauma has a way of seeping through walls adults believe are solid. They asked where mommy was, where daddy was, why the house was quiet now. No answer was sufficient. The GoFundMe numbers climbed as strangers tried to help in the only way they knew how. Money, messages, prayers typed into comment boxes. None of it brought comfort, but it built something else. A promise that the children would not be alone. As Michael was booked into an Ohio jail, the walls closed in. The orange jumpsuit replaced tailored suits. The surgical precision of his former life dissolved into institutional routine. Meals at fixed times. Lights out. No privacy. No control. For the first time in years, Michael had nothing to plan. And that terrified him more than anything. Courtrooms are designed to feel neutral. Wooden benches, pale walls, flags standing motionless in the corners. But neutrality is a lie when lives have been erased. Every hearing in the case against Michael McCoo carried the invisible weight of absence. 2 empty seats that would never be filled. Michael sat at the defense table, flanked by attorneys whose calm professionalism contrasted sharply with the storm of evidence awaiting him. He pleaded not guilty. The words echoed, procedural and expected, yet heavy with implication. Across the aisle, the prosecution laid out its intentions. They spoke of timelines, of travel records, of surveillance footage and digital footprints. They described a man who had driven through the night, crossed state lines, entered a home without force, and executed 2 people while their children slept. The defense countered with doubt. Was the video definitive? Could the vehicle have been driven by someone else? Was proximity proof? They reminded the court that suspicion was not guilt and that coincidence could look convincing when framed improperly. The judge listened. Justice, unlike revenge, moves slowly. Outside the courtroom, public opinion had already rendered its verdict. Headlines reduced complexity to certainty. Comment sections overflowed with anger, disbelief, and sorrow. People wanted answers. They wanted closure. But closure is a myth. For Spencer and Monique's families, life became divided into before and after. Holidays were quieter. Rooms felt larger. Laughter came with guilt attached. They learned to live with questions that would never be fully answered. Why did he wait so long? Why that night? Why leave the children alive? Some questions had no purpose beyond pain. The children grew. They would one day learn the truth, not all at once, but in fragments. In whispers. In headlines stumbled upon years later. In school projects about family trees that felt incomplete. They would learn that their parents were loved, that they were joyful, that they mattered, and they would learn that evil does not always look like monsters in the dark. Sometimes it wears professional titles and polite smiles. As the case moved forward, motions were filed. Evidence was challenged. Experts prepared to testify. Ballistics, digital forensics, behavioral analysis. Each detail would be dissected, argued, defended. Michael watched it all with a stillness that unnerved observers. Whether it was shock, denial, or calculation, no one could say. But the house in Columbus remained silent. New owners would one day repaint the walls, replace the floors, try to erase what happened there. But places remember. They absorb trauma into their foundations, whispering it back to those who listen closely. In the end, justice, whatever form it took, could not restore what was lost. It could only acknowledge it. 2 lives ended in the quiet hours of a winter night. 2 children carried forward into a future shaped by absence. And 1 man faced the consequences of a choice that began long before he turned the key in his car and drove toward Ohio. This was not just a story about murder. It was a story about obsession, entitlement, and the dangerous belief that another person's happiness can be taken away simply because it no longer includes you. And long after the verdict would be read, that truth would remain, unchanged, unchallenged, and irreversible.